If you run a company or manage a team, hiring qualified people quickly can make or break your business. Imagine a position of need going unfilled for weeks or even months because you just can't seem to find the right candidate. When it comes to hiring, Indeed is all you need. Stop struggling to get your job post seen on other job sites. Indeed sponsored jobs help you stand out and hire fast. With sponsored jobs, your post jumps to the top of the page for your relevant candidates so you can reach the people you want faster. This makes a huge difference. According to Indeed data, sponsored jobs posted directly on Indeed have 45% more applications than non-sponsored jobs. Plus, there's no monthly subscriptions, no long-term contracts. You only pay for results on your job post. Just in the last minute that I've been talking to you, 23 hires were made on Indeed, according to Indeed data worldwide. Now that is fast. There's no need to wait any longer. Speed up your hiring right now with Indeed. Listeners will get a $75 sponsored job credit to get your jobs more visibility at Indeed.com/BWN. Go to Indeed.com/BWN right now to support this podcast. Indeed.com/BWN. Terms and conditions apply.
What's up, guys? It's three-time NFL Pro Bowler, all-decade return specialist, Josh Cribbs. I want to welcome you to the MAC Sports Connection podcast, where Alex hosts all things MAC, all things football, all things sports, right here, MAC Sports Connection, baby. The Mid-American Conference best, bringing it only the greats, MAC, to everyone.
Welcome back, everyone, to the MAC Sports Connection podcast, your home for all things MACtion, part of the Varsity Podcast Network. I'm your host, Alex the Captain. Joining me, as always, it's Graham. Graham, welcome back. It's been a couple weeks since we've done this.
Yeah, take a couple weeks off, and suddenly MAC basketball ends.
Right?
That's coming up here on the end of the season. Fun to talk about the tournament. Fun to talk about some of the other MAC happenings going on. We've officially transitioned from winter sports to spring sports, but we got some of these winter sports hanging on for their last breath as it comes to March Madness time.
Gotta love it. I call it March Macness time because that just feels more appropriate for this league.
You certainly do.
Anyway, a lot of big news. Obviously, we have a conference tournament this week. Both the men and the women will be crowning a champion. But first, I think almost more importantly, before we get into the penultimate week of MAC basketball, obviously the champion will advance to the NCAA tournament. I think it's important we talk about Bowling Green. Talk about the weekend they've had. They've had Kyle Halleck, their skipper, 100 wins in his time at BG, the former Kent State pitcher. Their first sweep of the Ohio Bobcats since 2010 in baseball. Softball starting to turn it around. But I think more importantly, they just hired a football coach after losing a football coach 4 days ago. And that football coach is none other than the Eddie George. And if that name sounds familiar to you, Graham, that's right. The former Heisman Trophy winner from the Ohio State University Buckeyes from 1995 had a great pro career. I love this hire for the Falcons.
You know, I'm a little insulted that you would even suggest I don't know who Eddie George is, but yeah. I mean, this is a good one to kind of question what the state of coaching in college football is. You know, this is kind of a not quite on the same level, but this is kind of a Deion Sanders hire, where we're coming in and we're really bringing in a guy with a name. And you talked about he's been at Tennessee State for the last 4 years. And really, he's done a great job of turning that program around. Mm-hmm. This is not necessarily a championship program at Tennessee State, but a program who was a perennial basement dweller and who since then has had what was his record there the last 4 years?
I believe it's 28-24. But I think when you talk about record, that's something that people love to look at surface level, right? 28-24. That doesn't look impressive. right? I think that's a fair argument. But that's a very surface level argument. You have to look at what was going on in the program before that coach took over, and he just got him to the playoffs for the first time since 2012. Like, this is a good turnaround.
Yeah, and I think 4 years is the perfect amount of time to look at this, because that's the question here. Is this coaching? Is this X's and O's coaching? Is this bringing up players and really player development, or is this recruiting? I tend to see this as a recruiting, a recruiting win for Tennessee State over the last 4 years. You have that Eddie George Heisman Trophy winner name, and bring in some of these top recruits. And I think that's what he's going to bring to BG. That's when I'm talking about the Deion Sanders thing. And it's not that Deion doesn't know ball, but I don't think that anybody is out there saying, Deion Sanders is the Einstein of football X's and O's. I'm not sure that we're chalking him up as Bill Belichick. What we're talking about with Deion is that he's got a name, and he's got that brand that he can really bring in players through recruiting. Mm-hmm. And I think maybe that's the key to being a successful college football in this day, and successful college football coach in this day and age is just the recruiting part of it. Recruiting has always been a big part of the game. But I think nowadays it might be the only part of the game.
I think that's an interesting perspective. I think you're right. Recruiting is an incredibly big part of the game. And I still think that's actually the case. But I think it's not about how well you recruit. It's about the right time that you recruit them, right? Now with the transfer portal wide open, you've got this wild west of NIL. You're gonna see this more and more, and we've already started to see it a little bit. Guys are going to get developed at Group of 5 schools, like the Toledos, the Bowling Greens. They're going to transfer out. They're going to go to a Big Ten program. But, my cautionary tale, and this has been my cautionary tale for a while, the grass is not always greener. We've seen those stars. Most notably recently, Penny Boone, the former 1,300 rushing yarder from Toledo. He transferred 2 different times after he left Toledo. And he got put in a role position, like a backfield spot role down at UCF, and I think he's better than that. But you've now got to learn a whole new playbook. You've got to learn new coaching schemes. There's so many different things that these guys don't get. Really, I think the value of what they were getting at their original place, or whether it be Toledo, whether it be the Liberties of the world, whatever it may be. I feel like a lot of these guys, they get recruited away by these power programs, and you're losing valuable opportunities to get valuable reps in front of potential NFL scouts. You get buried on depth charts at these other schools, and there goes your potential for a future career. But that's a whole diatribe I have. I know you. I'm going to let you, but that's a whole different diatribe that I have on that whole situation. I'm still fired up about it.
Yeah, I mean, it seems like you're talking like a Mac fan from 2005, and in 2005 you'd be completely accurate. That would be 100% true. Everything you said. It's not 2005 anymore, Alex. It's 2025. It's 20 years later, and we do have NIL, and that's the difference. You got to ask, why are these guys trying to develop their football talent? Are they trying to be the greatest player of all time? Is that the goal? Or is the goal to go to the NFL and make money? And if the goal is to go to the NFL and make money, well, why wouldn't you just make money now? And so these guys, we talk about this idea that guys are getting buried on depth charts. And actually, really interesting article this week on ESPN, written by Kalen Collar, and kind of focusing on the combine in Indy this past week. But really, the idea being that small school guys are no longer getting combine invites. She focuses a lot on this idea of small school guys being at the FCS level or below that. So whether that's Division II or Division III or even Division I FCS, invitations to these guys to the combine are dwindling, and it's not because scouts and folks at the combine are not willing to extend these invitations anymore, it's because the talent has really shifted away from those smaller schools, and it's because of this availability of transfers. This year there were no, and really for the past 2 years, there's been no invites to the combine for players below Division I. So there's Division II and Division III recruits have not gotten invites to the combine. And as far as FCS players go, only 7 players got invites to this year's combine. And so that's down significantly from over time. And so the difference here is that it's not that talented players no longer play at small schools. It's that they only play at small schools for a year or two before transferring up. The number of players who transferred in, I think the year in this article is 2015, was something like 3%, 4% of players had transferred. So in the 2018 scouting combine, 2 of 336 players, so 0.6%, even less, 0.6% of players had transferred to a higher level of college football. So whether that's moving from NAIA to D2 or FCS to FBS, anything like that, you transfer from one level to the next level. This year, 28 of 330 players, so that's 8.5% of players have transferred. And so that's the difference, is that players are moving up in levels. And so when you talk about getting buried on the depth charts, remember that the NIL money is there too. So moving up a level gives you the opportunity for more eyes on you. It also gives you the opportunity to make a little bit of NIL money. And if you're going to get buried on the depth chart at one of these, the next level up, whether it's moving from an FCS school to an FBS school, or moving from a MAC school to a Power 4 school, or whatever that is, having the access to that NIL money, if you're a guy who was going to get buried on the depth chart at one of those schools, there's a good chance you're not going to be making the big bucks in the NFL. And so being able to make a little bit of money in college, and really tapping into that NIL market with the potential that maybe you do get more eyes on you because you do break out of that backup role. It seems like it's worth it. And these guys from small schools are banking on the Senior Bowl, and they're banking on the combine anyway to prove to scouts and to prove to NFL programs that they deserve to be drafted. And so taking on a running back role, or kind of a running back by committee, just a spot player for these bigger name schools, that's not a death sentence. It's not going to take away your NFL dreams, and it's going to open up the opportunity for so a little bit of compensation while you're in school. I don't know that there's really a downside for players transferring to these bigger schools, other than perhaps the development factor. NFL teams seem perfectly willing to develop players.
No, I think those are all fair points. Again, I'm very much on the train. I think that you do see. I know that article mentioned that guys like Khalil Mack were going to be relics of the past, coming from a smaller program and going as a top 5 pick. I mean, we've had a share of those from the Mid-American Conference. We've had Eric Fisher from Central Michigan, Ben Roethlisberger from Miami, Khalil Mack from Buffalo, and just last year we saw Quinyon Mitchell out of Toledo go in the top 18 of the NFL draft. So I mean, it still happens. I think that article accurately says it's going to happen less and less. But I mean, we just saw 4 MAC guys invited to the NFL Combine this year, and greatly improved their draft stock. I don't know that Harold Fannin Jr. from Bowling Green is a first round tight end, but I wouldn't be surprised to see him as a second round guy. I mean, he's got the toolkit.
What's funny? We've been talking about Harold Fannin Jr. All year long as potentially the number 2 tight end off the board, just because of his production, which was he had the most productive year of any tight end in college football this year. Yeah. And we've been talking about it maybe as the number 2 tight end. post combine, he's really dropped on draft boards.
Yeah.
Guys looked at him and thought he looks remarkably average. And that's the way the combine can hurt players. And that's the danger of staying at a MAC school, is that your production is pretty much wiped away. That people have said Harold Van Ens Jr. production doesn't count because it happened at Bowling Green. And so the only thing we care about is Senior Bowl and Combine. And because he wasn't especially impressive at either of those two venues, he's fallen down draft boards. So I think that's the issue, is how do we make this argument that that these group of five schools, these group of five programs are still as competitive, that the results that happen in the group of five should be, at least weighted against results happening in the Power Four. And I don't know what the answer is. I think greater access to the playoff is one way to do that. When we have these big postseason games that give a stage to a smaller program. But as long as we're only seeing the Boise States of the world, and really no longer Boise State, since they're changing conferences, but as long as we're only seeing the Boise States of the world make the playoff, even that's going to be difficult to do. And you're right, with this revolving door transfer, the idea that guys don't stick around at smaller programs makes it even harder for these smaller programs to compete. It worries me. I'm worried that we are seeing the death of the competitive group of five football program, between the NIL and between the transfer portal and as well as the access to the playoff. I think it's getting harder and harder for group of five schools to compete. And it's harder and harder for group of five coaches. So bringing it back to Eddie George, do you think he is going to make a difference for the Bowling Green Falcons, knowing that they're coming off an excellent coach? Is this a step up for Bowling Green? Are we going to see better Falcon football coming up?
So I think that's kind of an interesting question, right? I think that with Scott Loeffler going to the NFL, like he cited how the game has just changed so much with NIL, with the transfer portal. The thing is Eddie George has been dealing with that now at Tennessee State, right? He lost guys to the transfer portal. He lost guys because of NIL money. So this is nothing new to him now. Like, this is something that he has gotten acclimated to. And he's not only saying, hey, I want to commit to coaching college football. I want to now go up to a program that's better resourced with slightly better overall financials, right? Tennessee State, they're an FCS program out of the OVC, sorry, the OAC is the D3 conference, the OVC and the Big South. But I think that you're also going to see now he's going to be playing or working with a program that gets much more national exposure, purely because of marquee games like the non-conference games against Power 4 opponents. And I think you're going to have access to a greater budget, access to better facilities, just a lot of things. He's committing to that. And so I think that there's value in that. But I also think, to your point about Deion Sanders earlier, that this feels like a name hire. I do think that his coaching chops speak for themselves. He's done a great job at Tennessee State. And that's why I really like this hire. But I think that the star power of being coached by Eddie George, there's value in that. There's a lot of value in that, especially if you're a kid in Ohio. You grew up hearing stories of Eddie George. I was going to say you grew up watching Eddie George, but Graham, kids who watch Eddie George are our age now, and they're not playing college football anymore.
Yeah, that's right. Most of the kids who watch Eddie George, most of the kids who are playing college football now, not around in the 90s.
Right. That's what I hear. And so but especially if you grew up a Buckeye fan, Eddie George. You know the story of the Heisman Trophy winners from Ohio State lore. That's just so to be able to say, yeah, my son plays for Eddie George at Bowling Green. I think there's a lot of recruiting star power in that. But also I think that if nothing else, if it doesn't help with recruiting right away, I think it helps with retention for this next year. That transfer portal window after a coach leaves, it opens for 30 days. Players can look to go elsewhere. Now you've got Eddie George coming in, which I think, again, for the name, there's a lot of value in that. He gets to keep those guys, and those guys say, dude, I went from Scott Loeffler to Eddie George, legendary NFL running back, legendary Ohio State running back. This feels like the right move Derek Vandermeer from Bowling Green has made. And he's done a great job with all the coaches he's replaced at Bowling Green the last several years. This feels like another solid run. And again, it's way too early to tell, but I really like this hire for the Bowling Green brand to have, again, the star power of Eddie George wearing the BG logo, coaching on Tuesday Night Maction. That's huge for not only Bowling Green, but it's huge for the Mid-American Conference.
Yeah, I mean, I think this certainly gives Bowling Green an edge up on when it comes to recruiting, especially from the Columbus area. And one of those things where MAC schools would love inroads into the Columbus area. It's so hard to recruit from that area because of Ohio State being right there, and because of Cincinnati not being that far around, that far behind. And there's just so many programs right in that area. It's hard to convince kids from Columbus to come to any of the MAC schools, even the Ohio MAC schools. So having inroads into Columbus, always a good thing.
Absolutely. So again, way too early to tell yet. I think that this is a good hire for the Falcons. A reminder to Falcon fans listening, Eddie George will be wearing brown and orange on Saturdays, not scarlet and gray. So if you show up to Doit Perry, make sure you're wearing your brown and orange. Just a casual reminder for you folks out there. Before we get into the MAC tournament, I wanted to give a quick hit out to the Lock Haven Eagles, MAC tournament champions in wrestling. Moving on to the NCAA tournament, they were the 2 seed in the conference, and they came out swinging, came out throwing, and came out wrestling, and got the dub at the MAC tournament. So I just wanted to give a shout out to the Lock Haven Eagles for winning the MAC wrestling championships.
Yeah, I mean, that's a big win, and one of our winter sports finally wrapping up.
Slow and steady. Speaking of sports, guys, I wanted to make sure that you have checked out the Varsity app by Lairfield. It's your go-to destination for live game audio, exclusive content, top tier college sports podcast, all free to download the Apple App Store or the Google Play Store. With the Varsity Network app, you can stream live radio broadcasts from all of your favorite Division I teams, including calls from MAC voices, Big Ten voices, and many, many more. You can customize your experience by saving your favorite schools, sports, and shows for quick and easy access. You can also dive into the Varsity Podcast Network, featuring fan favorite shows like the MAC Sports Connection podcast, the Group of Five Guys podcast, the Sickos Committee podcast, and many more. So make sure you guys don't miss it. Download the Varsity app today for free. Get closer to the action with the calls and podcasts that keep you in the game. Speaking of in the game, Graham, how pumped are you that we are finally at the MAC basketball tournament? I can't believe it. It doesn't feel like it's been a year since we saw Kent State and Akron duke it out in the championship game.
Well, you know how much of a baseball guy I am, but this might be my favorite MAC event of the year. Is the MAC basketball tournament. It's so fun to have both the men's and the women's teams at the same venue, to go back and forth between these tournaments that are kind of intermingled together, and to have all that MAC excitement in Cleveland. It's a blast. It's a blast. And if you're in Northeast Ohio, I do recommend getting some tickets, heading out there and checking out these contests. Even if you're not a fan of any of these teams in particular, it is a blast. And a lot of fun to be checking out some MAC basketball and really get hyped up for the March Madness to come.
Absolutely. Just kind of a quick rundown on teams participating. On the men's side, we've got Akron taking on Bowling Green in the 1v8, Toledo taking on Ohio in the 4v5, Miami taking on Eastern Michigan in the 2v7, and then Kent State, as high as the 3 seed, taking on number 6 Western Michigan. Then over on the women's side, we've got number 1 Ball State taking on number 8 Western Michigan. Number 4, Kent State taking on number 5, Miami. Number 2, Toledo taking on number 7, Central Michigan. And then number 3, Buffalo taking on number 6, Bowling Green. I'm looking at these brackets early, man, and I got to tell you, I really, really like a Kent State Akron rematch in the men's side.
Well, before we get too far into matchups here, let's remind the folks the women's tournament kicks off on Wednesday, and the men's tournament kicks off on Thursday. Yeah, I mean, if we want to start on the men's side there, Akron and Kent, they're set up in such a beautiful way on the in the opposite corners of this bracket. We can almost watch that waterfall right into the finals. I have a hard time picking against Akron this year. They've been so good all year long. Their team is so consistent. They are so well balanced. If you removed a single player from Akron, it feels like they would just reload. That's the so I'm not worried about any particular guy having a bad game and it kind of ruin Akron's run. I really can't see a situation where Akron falters before the finals. As much as I think the Rockets team, the Toledo team on that side of the bracket is a tough team. I really don't see them as a stumbling block for the Zips heading towards the finals. On the other side of the bracket, Miami's been great all year. Really, their kryptonite has been the Akron Zips, and so Miami has been great all year long. And you're right, Kent State also great. It's interesting to kind of compare these two because this is when it comes to the teams, Akron has the best offense in the MAC, followed by Miami. Kent State with the best defense in the MAC, and then Miami coming in at 3. So Akron, the best offense in the MAC, Miami maybe the most balanced team in the MAC, and Kent State with the best defense. I mean, I think those are our contenders, right? I mean, we kind of looking at it. I don't want to knock off this Toledo team already. They feel like the tier below the top 3.
I agree with that. I mean, I'm looking at Toledo's numbers right now. In terms of just points allowed, they're second to last in the Mid-American Conference. Like this is a Toledo team who, while they have a top 5 offense in the MAC, they actually come in at number 4 at 78 and a half points. They're giving up almost 80 points a contest. And I mean, they've gotten blown out by Kent State. They've gotten blown out by Akron. I mean, they've lost some games that really it just feels like they shouldn't be losing in that big a fashion. Like it just feels like those blowouts shouldn't have been that way. Todd Kowalczyk's team this year, defense has just been seemingly non-existent, especially on the perimeter.
Yeah, I mean, Sam Lewis and Sonny Wilson have been dropping points for the Rockets all year long. But you're right, the defense has been almost non-existent. And I think that's the difference between these teams is it feels like if Toledo can sink 1,000,000 points, then they'll win the game. But if not, the other side might sink 1,000,000 points.
Yeah.
And that's what's tough, especially in tournament basketball, when we know how a team can just get hot at the right time and run the table. I think Toledo's going to have a hard time finding that consistency, especially when they are going to go up against Akron in the second round. I'm calling it now. Akron's going to win that first round game, and that doesn't feel like too big of a bet. But Akron takes down Bowling Green in that first round, and then we see them come up against either Toledo or the Bobcats in round 2. If Toledo makes it to that second round, I have a hard time seeing how they would take down Akron.
I'm with you. Honestly, like I know Toledo just had that big win over Ohio to close out the regular season. We saw what happened to Toledo a year ago when they closed out the regular season with a win over the team that they played in the first round of the MAC tournament. They ended up losing. I see that happening again for this Rockets team. This, again, I know Toledo, they actually swept Ohio this year. Fun fact. I don't see them going 3 in a row, especially not a quick turnaround a week after the end of the season. I don't see it happening. I think that this is the end of the road. But I think if you're Toledo fans, this is what you expect this year. The last 4 years they've won the regular season. The expectation has been make the finals, go to the NCAA tournament, and that didn't happen. I mean, they didn't win any of those. This year, your expectations are, I pray we make it to day 2. And I think that's a realistic expectation for this team. As much as I would love to see Toledo end the drought dating back to 1980, I think it continues another year and we move on to year 47 since they last won the MAC, or since they last made the NCAA tournament. Although this has been a year of ending droughts. We saw the Ohio Bobcats end an incredibly long drought in college football dating back to 1968, winning a MAC title. Who knows? This could very well be the year the Rockets do it, the year where the pressure is off.
Yeah, I mean, that's the it seems like last year Toledo was last year's version of this year's Akron team, a team that you can't really point to any particular big star, but a team who is so solid all around, that you're not really worried about any one person having an off night. Compared to a couple of years ago, that Toledo team that had JT Shoemate and had Ray J Dennis on it, a team that was full of stars. This year's Toledo team is a team that has, it seems like, second tier stars on it, and maybe in another year, I mean, Todd Kowalczyk tends to reload these teams. Maybe in another year, Toledo is right back at the top of the MAC again. But I don't think this is the Rockets' year. I can't talk enough about Akron, but let's talk about a little bit about these 2 and 3 seeds. What do you think about Miami?
That's a great question. I don't know, man. This is hit or miss for me. I feel like, and I got to pull up their numbers because I was just looking at this before we started recording today. I'm not confident in Miami right now, which I know sounds crazy, right? And I think props to you. You relatively accurately called it. They lost that game against Western Michigan. And you said you would not be surprised if they went 2-2 over their next 4 games. Well, guess what, Graham? They went 2-2 over their next 4 games, losing to Eastern Michigan by double digits, beating Kent State, which felt very odd, beating Northern Illinois, and then losing to Ohio by double digits. To Ohio by 9. So you called that one. So hats off to you, my friend. But I'm not confident in this team. I mean, they're looking back at that win over, or that loss over Eastern on the road. Well, now you're Miami. Guess what? You're on the road again. I don't know, man. I don't know how I feel about this Miami team. Peter Sutter is going to be the difference maker. He has to be just on. That's their make or break right now.
Well, I mean, between him and Cam Kraft, these Miami Redhawks team has a few guys who can score, and they've shown at times that they can lock down on defense too. It's been hard to really pull out what the identity of this Miami team is. They're another team whose stars don't shine quite as bright as somebody like the Bobcats, AJ Clayton, who's been so great all year. Their stars aren't shining quite as bright. At the same time, they're not a wholly offensive team. They're not a wholly defensive team. It's hard to pick out what the Miami Redhawks identity is this year. And yes. I think that identity crisis might be the difference in the tournament. I have not trusted this Miami team all year, and it is because of that. It's because of this idea that we don't really know who they are. Mm-hmm. And I think maybe that's what where they're going to run into in the tournament. When it comes to Kent State, however, we know exactly who they are.
Yeah. Yeah.
They are a defensive team. They are a lockdown team. They play super disciplined basketball. They've had a couple of real studs on the team in Von Cameron Davis and Jalen Sullinger. And this is a Kent State team who has all of the right pieces. They've got a couple of studs who can get hot at the right moments if they need to score buckets. They've got a super disciplined defense that holds opponents to the lowest average in the MAC. And it's the kind of team who is really built for tournament time. And that's you look like you wanted to say something there.
I want to ask you about something with their schedule, but I want you to finish your point.
Oh, my point is just that this team would not surprise me if they make a deep run. Obviously, that biggest obstacle is going to be the Miami Redhawks, but I think Kent State is the perfect kryptonite to Miami this year.
So they have their first game is against Western Michigan in the tournament here, the 3-6 game. This is the rubber match. This is a big one. And really, for everything Western's done, and I've not been overly high on Western Michigan, but I'm looking at some of their stats, and this is a team that kind of surprised people, not because of their offense, but rather because of their defense. Like, this has been a better defensive team than they have been an offensive team. So I think we're going to see kind of strength against strength. And I like Western in this first one if Kent State's not focused up. I mean, they played Western a week ago. I really, really think that this could be a very interesting first round game for the Golden Flashes.
I think that's interesting. Let's get into it. Let's start making some picks here. Let's start Akron Bowling Green. Who's gonna win that one? I think we're pretty unanimous in this one. Am I right in thinking the Zips are going to move on to the next round?
Nah, man, Falcons all the way, baby. No, I like the Zips. I like the Zips. Zips run away with this one. Now, in fairness, Akron struggled with Bowling Green on the road early in the season in their one matchup. But I really think Akron, they're tournament locked. They're ready to go. They're not focused on round one. They're focused on round one, but they know that's not the end game.
Yeah, this is a team that's been in tune-up mode for almost a month now, getting ready for the tournament. I think they will be ready for the tournament. Ohio Toledo is the 4-5, or rather 5-4, based on the way I said it. Is this Bobcats or Rockets moving on to the next round?
I said it before, and I'll say it again. Toledo pulled out a 3-point victory at Ohio earlier in the year, and then they pulled out a dominant victory at home to end the season. But the last time we've seen Toledo do that, they ended up losing in the first round of the tournament. I like Ohio. Ohio is just always a tournament like ready team. They're not a first round eliminated team. So give me the Bobcats.
Yeah. I also love the Bobcats here, but picking the same as you would not be any fun. So I'm going to go Rockets. Moving on. Let's stay on this side of the bracket. Akron versus, in your case, Akron versus the Bobcats. Who's going to the championship?
I got to say it. I got to go Akron. This Akron team's kind of reminding me of the 18-19 Buffalo team, where they were just so good and just blew through the conference. 17-1 this year in conference play. It's hard to sneeze at. Give me Akron in the finals.
Absolutely. I'm going the same way. Zips over Rockets, putting the Zips in the finals here. Let's go down to the other side of the bracket. Miami versus Eastern. Remember this Eastern team, a team with a couple of studs on it. We've had Jalen Terry and Deshaun Nelson, who have been both at the top of the conference in terms of scoring pretty much all year. So who do we have? Red Hawks versus Eagles, a Birds matchup.
Go Eagles. 2 words.
Go Eagles. Wow.
Go Eagles. I'm taking the Eagles with the upset in the first round.
I love that pick. I think the Eagles are the kind of team who, if they get hot, they can absolutely do it. They've got the studs on the team, and I have mistrusted Miami all year long. So give me EMU in the moving on to the next round. Broncos versus Flashes.
I think the Flashes spook the herd of Broncos, and the Flashes move on, man. I think again, Western has all the toolkits or all the tools to beat Kent State. But I think it's the tournament lights get a little bright, and Western hasn't really done anything in the tournament in several years. 2017 was their last tournament championship, I believe. Give me the Golden Flashes to kind of avenge their close games with these Broncos.
See, this is a bummer, but I'm making the same pick with you. Kent State versus Eastern in that next round.
Man, for everything I just said about Kent State and the lights not being too bright for them, I'm going to go upset. I'm going upset. I'm going upset city, and I know you're probably going a different direction. I know what I said at the top of the segment about a potential rematch. Give me upset city. Give me the Eagles in the championship game, man.
Oh, I want to see that wagon wheel up for grabs in the MAC championship. So I'm going to go Flashes. Both of us have the Zips in the finals. You have Eastern Michigan. I have Kent State. Who's your overall tournament champion?
Overall tournament champion. I think this one feels obvious, reminiscent of those old Buffalo teams. I'm gonna go Akron, and I really think this Akron team has just looked so good all year. They've had one hiccup in conference play, and that's what that was. That was a hiccup. They've looked so good, top to bottom, bench to starters. Everybody has looked fantastic. John Gross has done an excellent job getting this team ready after what was expected to be a drop off. You lost a lot of studs from last year, but there was no drop off. They didn't retool. They just simply reloaded. They're like, all right, next man up. And I love that about this Akron team.
It's funny. It seems like the team has almost taken advantage. Losing Enrique Freeman was a big deal.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a big name for this Zip squad. And it's almost like the team took advantage of losing him and everybody stepped up. Rather than seeing a single player step up and step into that role, it seems like the whole team did. That's why the Zips are also my pick to win the tournament this year. I'm going to go tournament MVP Nate Johnson, but it could be anybody else on that Zip squad.
Wow. Okay. I respect the pick, man. I'm going to go give me Tavari Johnson. We'll keep the Johnson name, but we're going to go a different guy.
Well, I love that for us. That's our men's side preview. Let's bounce over to the women.
Man, I'm so excited for this women's tournament. I feel like looking at this bracket, any one of these women's teams, with maybe the exception of Central or Western, could win this thing.
Oh, really?
I feel like the top six can win this thing.
I have a completely different viewpoint. That's the Ball State has been so strong all year. Toledo has been strong all year. Buffalo has been strong all year. And Kent State has also looked strong. Although, again, I think there's a drop off after the top three. That being said, I cannot imagine anyone under the 4th seed moving on. This is going to go all chalk in the first round.
Wow. Okay. See,
I'll just make my picks real quick. All chalk.
Wow. No, I don't think that at all. I think the game that I have circled for day one of the women's side, that 6-3 game, Bowling Green, Buffalo. I love this Buffalo team. I love Becky Burke. You know this. I'm probably not her biggest fan, but I'm definitely top 500 of her biggest fans.
That's not very high.
And I love Becky Burke. But this Bowling Green team snuck into this tournament, climbed up the rankings, got the 6th seed, and I was looking at their schedule a moment ago. I really, really, really think that this Bowling Green team could do some damage in this tournament if they catch things right. They've won 2 out of their last 3. They've actually gone on, with the exception of the loss in Northern Illinois, they haven't lost since they lost to Ball State back in, January? Yeah, the end of January. This is a good Bowling Green team who is they've been on a tear. I mean, they knocked off Kent State. They beat Toledo. They beat Western, Central, Ohio, Eastern Michigan, and now you draw Buffalo, who, by the way, they only lost to Buffalo by 10 in the 3rd game of the MAC regular season. Watch out for this Bowling Green team. Amy Valesco is a stud.
No argument there. I think Bowling Green is a good team. I do not think they're a great team, and that's the difference here. They're going up against a Buffalo team who is similar to how we've talked about teams on the men's side, that Ohio team who seems to always get hot just in time for the tournament. Since Coach Burke has been around, this has been a team who gets hot in time for the tournament. And these Buffalo teams, I can't think of anyone I would rather face less in the on the women's side than a Buffalo team in the MAC tournament, especially knowing that there's one bid on the line. Going against this Buffalo team is always hard. And then Chella Watson just holding down the Buffalo Bulls. I don't see it. I don't see Bowling Green pulling this one out. Buffalo is too good, and that's where it's at. In terms of game that I think could be an upset, what team that I think could be upset in this tournament, it's the Toledo Rockets. That being said, I don't trust the Central Michigan team, and that's what I mean when I say that the top 4 seeds. I think they're all moving on. Kent State, Miami, hardly an upset to say that Miami might win that game, just because Miami has been good all year. They have been very comparable to the Golden Flashes. So that game is still kind of a toss up in my mind. But I think Toledo is susceptible to a loss in this tournament, but not against Central Michigan. And so,
no, I think you're right. Toledo's going to win that first round game. They're not going to lose to Central. Toledo, for all the stuff that they went through, I think you got to give Jenny Boggs her flowers. She came into a program that lost a lot of star power after last season, and you were relying mostly on Sammy McConowitz, who has been a star in her own right. They call her the mayor from Rossford, and she's lived up to that reputation her entire career at Toledo. She's one of the best players in UT women's basketball history. And Jenny Boggs just came in and just worked around her, said, "Hey, I know what this player's skill set is." And I think that's a sign of a good coach. You're able to just continue on that trajectory. I mean, this is the lowest seed Toledo's had in 4 years, which is insane to think about, that Toledo's been so good. And all they did was just continue to keep it going with a new coach, with a bunch of new players starting. I really think that there's an opportunity for Toledo to be in a really good position to win this tournament. But I don't know that I trust anybody to beat them before the championship. I feel like Toledo could sneak into that game, but we'll talk those picks in a minute. But I really think that this is a really good Toledo women's basketball team they faced some adversity. They had a crazy loss to Kent State this last week. They lost to Bowling Green on the road, and then they lost. They're all of their losses have all been on the road in conference play, minus the weird Northern Illinois loss. But everything else has been a road loss. So I think getting to Cleveland, Toledo's familiar with Cleveland. They understand how it works in Cleveland. You just have somebody else and not named Trisha Coleup leading the team. So I think that this is an opportunity for this program to get this first round win, especially against Central Michigan, who, let's face it, Central Michigan has not been as good as they were in years past. You remember the old Central Michigan teams. This is not that same team. Toledo gets it done.
Yeah, I mean, that's what we're talking about. We're talking about making picks here. The Rockets are still my pick in the first round, but I do think this team is especially susceptible. And let's not downplay the loss of Trisha Coleup. That's a big loss for a team, especially when it comes tournament time, when you need that stability. And this is not a knock, but Trisha Coleup, big deal. Coach for the Rockets, and just a pillar of stability when it came to tournament time. I think we're going to see whether or not this Toledo team is prepared for the rigor of the tournament, and it'll be interesting. I think that'll be an interesting call out. Similar to the argument I made before, this Toledo team this year has not seemed like a team that has a solid identity to me, and I think that can be a downside when it comes to tournament time. And so, for that reason, I'm out, as the Sharks say. Let's now, Miami, Kent State, like I said, that matchup can go either way. I love both of these teams. I think both of these teams go deep in the tournament. And Ball State, Western Michigan, I think that game can only go one way. Allie Becky has been too good this year. Ball State has been too good this year. I cannot imagine Western Michigan pulling this one out.
No, I think Ball State, spoiler alert, I think they get to the finals. But you're right. Allie Becky has been such a dominant player. And I think that we've seen Ball State get so close the last several years. They've lost to Toledo in the tournament. They lost to Buffalo in the tournament. I believe last year they lost to Kent State in the tournament. So, I mean, this is a team who's gotten so close so many times. Allie Becky's been on all those teams. She's trying to go out with a tournament ring on her finger. And so I think they blow by Western Michigan in this first round.
Yeah, Ball State's been so good all year, and Allie Becky has been such a big part of that. Let's go ahead and officially make our picks. Let's start at the bottom of the bracket this time, because I think that 4-5 matchup is gonna be the most interesting one to talk about. So Buffalo Bowling Green, you kind of made this pick earlier, but let's make it official. Who you taking there?
Ziggy, baby.
Wow,
talon's up. I love you, Becky Burke, but talon's up.
Well, I'm going with Buffalo. I think Buffalo is making it out of the next round.
You're also trying to get free lunch next time we visit Buffalo, aren't you?
You bet your butt I am. Let's go Toledo, Central Michigan. I think we know where we're going here, but let's make it official, Alex.
Go Rockets.
That's right. Rockets moving on to the next round. Let's stay on that side of the bracket. You've got Bowling Green, Toledo in a rivalry matchup in the second round. Who's moving on to the finals from there?
I'm going to give you 3 letters, and I hope you respond with the correct 3 letters. So I'm just going to say TOL.
It sounds like EDO, baby.
So Rockets to the championship.
Sending the Rockets to the championship. I have Buffalo making it to the finals there. I really like this Buffalo team. I really like Chella Watson, and I don't think the Rockets quite have the stability and the maturity to handle the tournament pressures. So I think Buffalo makes it to the finals there.
I do want to say Buffalo Toledo has been my new favorite conference rivalry when it comes to women's basketball. Those battles are always electric.
It's electric,
and this year they were,
and especially in the tournament.
Yes.
Another thing, if you're coming down or coming up, or where I don't know where you're coming from, but you're coming to Cleveland to check out some basketball this week, that would be a matchup I would have circled. If Toledo and Buffalo end up going up against each other, it's going to be electric. Let's go to the top of the bracket here. Ball State, Western Michigan. I think we know who we're picking here, but who you got, Alex?
Chirp, chirp.
Chirp, chirp, Ball State to the next round. Me as well. Now, 4-5, I think this is the most interesting matchup of the first round. That's not hard to say. It's meant to be. It's the 4-5 matchup. But Miami versus Kent State, this is a big matchup. We've got a couple of stars for each of these teams. Each of these teams has played remarkably similar throughout the year. Who do you have here, Alex?
You mentioned her before. Jenna Batch has been incredible for Kent State, and she's another player who, last year they made the NCAA tournament. I believe Jenna is a senior, and she would love to go back to back, as would most seniors. So I like Kent State in this matchup. I think Miami, they're close. I mean, they've got some talent on this roster, but I think for Miami, it's the same thing that you say for Toledo. I don't feel like they have a true identity. Angelina Gonzalez has been like the motor behind this team, and statistically that is correct. You've got Amber Treader, of course, who has been an anchor on defense, but I feel like this team runs through one or two players. There's not a lot of depth behind the majority of their starters, and I think that's why they're sitting at 19 and 11. 19 and 10, and I think that's a big reason as to why this is going to be a first round exit.
Regular season basketball at the college level, both men and women run so much through offense. These records are so much about offense. Miami has been the class of the MAC this year when it comes to defense. Their defense has been so good and so locked down. And you know, as they say, defense wins championships. It's a great gift to be able to rely upon your defense when it comes to tournament time. And there might be some nerves and there might be some energy in the stadium, and that's hard to deal with. And I think that defensive stability is an advantage for Miami here. So I'm going to take Miami to win this one. I know I said I was going to go all chalk, but for this one, it feels almost chalk to take the 5 over the 4. Angelina Gonzalez has been great. I think she's going to do enough for the Redhawks. And I think this Miami defense locks down. I love Jenna Bash and Kent State, but I think this is Miami win in the first round.
No, I think that's fair. I think that's a solid pick.
All right. So next round, we've got Ball State for you, Ball State, Kent State, who moves on to the finals there.
Man, I love this matchup. Last year, we saw Ball State, Kent State in the semifinals, the 2v3. And it was Kent State moving on 65-50 over Ball State. I think they reverse this year. I think Ball State gets that win. Like we've talked about ad nauseum. I won't repeat it too much. Ball State's looks so good. But this, as much as I love the Toledo-Buffalo rivalry, especially in the tournament, Ball State, Kent State has turned into a fun little rivalry matchup as well. And especially on the women's side, it's just been some great basketball between good programs. But I like Ball State in this one. Give me the Cardinals to advance to the finals.
I've got a red team matchup here in Ball State versus Miami, and another bird matchup. I love the bird games. In this case, I'm taking the birds. The birds being Ball State. They're going to move on to the finals. Again, similar to reasoning that you had. Ball State's been so good all year, and I think they're just a little too much for Miami to handle. That puts us in the finals. Both of us have Ball State there. You have the Toledo Rockets making it all the way. Wow. I have that's not so surprising. You have the 1 versus the 2 seed in the finals. I have the 1 versus the 3 seed. We're not making outrageous picks here. But 1v2 Ball State versus Toledo. Who comes out on top this year, Alex?
I do think, again, this sounds silly, but I think you got to go Ball State in the finals. I know Toledo beat them in the late half of the season, but I think Ball State takes the rubber match. I know you joke about the fact that we don't have like crazy picks. Last year it was the 4 and the 3 seed in the championship game. So you going with a 3 seed isn't too far fetched, especially when last year the 3 seed won the tournament. So it's something to kind of hang your hat on, I guess, if you're listening and you're trying to make your own picks. But I really like Ball State in this one. They've looked so good all year long. Give me the Cardinals going back to the NCAA tournament. In fact, and I was doing a little bit of digging. This would be the first time that they've been to the NCAA tournament since 2009.
Well, unfortunately, I'm going to go a different route here. That drought is going to continue a little bit longer for Ball State. I have loved Buffalo this year, and really that's due in such large part to Chella Watson. I think I wish you would have said spoiler alert when you talked about the 3rd seed winning it all last year, because I was going to make that point as well. But 3rd seeds are not underdogs when it comes to the MAC tournament. And I think Buffalo proves that here. This is going to be a hell of a matchup, Buffalo Ball State. But I do think Buffalo comes out on top. And I think we're crowning Chella Watson tournament MVP.
I think if Buffalo wins the thing, you crown Chella Watson the tournament MVP. For me, Ball State winning it, you crown Allie Becky. I think that makes the most sense. Tournament MVP most often, as we talked about in the pre-show, comes from the team that wins it. I got to go Allie Becky when Ball State wins this tournament.
Well, we'll see how things turn out here in Cleveland this week. Should be an exciting week of basketball. Women's tournament starting on Wednesday with an 11 a.m. matchup. That's Ball State, Western Michigan. Men's tournament starting on Thursday with an 11 a.m. matchup. That is the Zips, who are going to take down Bowling Green, as you heard it here first. So if you get a chance, sneak out to Cleveland this week. Check out some MAC basketball. It should be exciting. And see if our picks are right. I have no idea, but I feel very confident that mine are right and Alex's are wrong.
I think you are more wrong than I am.
Okay, that's a take.
It's the correct take. Just so you folks know. No, Graham, anything else you want to throw out there before we wrap this thing up?
I think that's it. It's I think this is going to be a lot of fun. MAC sports coming up. We've got the MAC tournament this week. We're getting into baseball, softball season. All the spring sports coming up, and just hitting right at my favorite time of year for MAC sports. And so excited to continue covering them with you. Thanks for bearing with us with a couple of weeks off. But we had to catch our breath before this final push for basketball season. It's going to be so exciting, and I'd love to continue covering things.
Absolutely. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. Make sure you check out all the socials. You can find us on Twitter, X at the MSC Podcast, on Instagram at the MSC Podcast, YouTube, where you can listen to the show at MSC Podcast. Of course, you can find us on all of your favorite podcast apps, not only just the Varsity Podcast app, but of course, Apple, Spotify, Radio Public. You can find us on iHeartRadio, which I think is pretty cool. You can also find us on Amazon Music, and you can listen to us there. So you have an Alexa, you can say, "Hey, Alexa, play the greatest Mac podcast available," and she'll pull us up, I hope. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. We really appreciate it. And we will see you once we have a MAC tournament champion. Thanks for tuning in.